Good morning, everyone. I'm stepping into the chair as vice chair today in the absence of Mukesh Sharma, who is unwell with the flu. You're all very welcome to this slightly later in the month of December accountability session. The date was changed to accommodate the national meeting of police chiefs, which was being held in Belfast. It's vitally important for the PSNI to be part of those wider discussions on policing developments nationally and internationally. Director General, welcome. You were also at those discussions, and we will no doubt hear about some of the themes discussed later in the meeting. Can I also take this opportunity to welcome Deirdre Hargey, who has joined the board as a political member in place of Cathal Boylan, and our thanks to Cathal for his work up until now on the board. Now, today we have a particularly full agenda of our meeting. We will start off with looking specifically at progress to date on outcome 1 of the policing plan, outcome 2, sorry, of the policing plan, which is we have safe and engaged communities with confidence in policing. This outcome covers public confidence in policing, partnership working with local communities to provide local solutions to local problems, how safe people feel in their community, the threat posed by paramilitaries and other organised crime groups, tackling repeat offending, prevention of death and serious injury on our roads, and cybercrime, in particular online fraud, ransomware and sextortion. Chief Constable, your report records good progress in one of those areas, public confidence in policing, limited progress in cybercrime, and adequate progress in other areas. We look forward to exploring the successes and the challenges of this policing plan outcome. We will then move to questions on wider policing issues within your accountability report, and we will conclude our meeting with the 6-monthly report from the Director General of the National Crime Agency. But first, we begin with some welcome news on finance, and that's something new for us. It has been confirmed by the Justice Minister that that funding has been awarded for the Police Pay Award for year 1 of the recruitment funding. So this means that for this financial year at least, the money has been provided for all that we hope to do operationally, including year 1 of the recovery plan. Now, having lobbied hard alongside you, Chief Constable, for this budget allocation, it is only right that the board records its thanks to the executive for their support of policing. However, other operational resourcing challenges remain. As a board, we are agreed that the cost of legacy policing should not be funded from the current day budget, and that the Westminster government has a duty, given their responsibilities for policing and security matters during the Troubles, to provide specific ring-fenced funding to deal with all legacy matters at hand. And we will continue to advocate around that. We have written publicly to the Secretary of State on this matter, and we await his reply. In the context of legacy, on Tuesday, the final Operation Canova report was published, and Sir Ian will join us later today to discuss any issues arising. It was a significant report on a number of fronts, and there is still, of course, a final report to come on Operation Denton. It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge, Chief Constable, your leadership of Operation Canova prior to your appointment as Chief Constable, and to thank you and Sir Ian for your diligence in this work. In the past month, we have also had the deeply concerning theft of ammunition at Steeple, and members will have questions on this later in the meeting. My final opening remark, regrettably, once again, concerns assaults on officers. One of the most recent being a stabbing incident, frightening, appalling, and totally unacceptable. And we trust that all the officers make a full and speedy recovery. As a board, we have made it quite clear that those who perpetrate such attacks on police, or indeed any other emergency service worker, must be dealt with robustly, and we have conveyed this to the Justice Minister in response to the recent consultation on sentencing. Chief Constable, I invite you to present your accountability report.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you and good morning to everybody watching online for taking the time to show an interest in the Policing Board. Before I begin my opening remarks, I just want to acknowledge some retired colleagues who are in the room. Your final remarks around the assault of officers, each of which I spoke to in a particular instant, and the seriousness of that, reflect the real dangers and challenges of being a police officer. Sadly, we lost a retired police officer through suicide a few days ago. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to understand the real issues that face police officers today. And those challenges continue after many of those officers retire. So I just wanted to acknowledge our retired colleagues in the room. As you said, Chair, this month I'm presenting the formal update on outcome 2 of the policing plan, which is we have safe and engaged communities with confidence in policing. At its heart, this outcome is about whether people feel safe in their homes and neighbourhoods, and whether they trust to be there, for us to be there when they need us. It's also a measure of how well people feel we work with our partners, in the community. Our community focus is the foundation of our legitimacy and our effectiveness. Policing works best when it is embedded in those communities. My report this month provides our assessment of performance against this outcome and details significant ongoing work across the organisation. And my colleague, Deputy Chief Constable Singleton, and others will speak on this after my remarks. To build on the good work and continue achieving such positive outcomes, a community-focused police service must be properly and sustainably funded. I make no apology for continuing pressing the case for a sufficient and sustainable funding settlement for policing. As I've told this board before, in real terms, the impact of inflation means the PSNI has now 40% less budget for non-staff costs since the devolution of policing in 2010. And we have lost over 700 police officers since 2021 as a result of the budgetary pressures. These facts are utterly unacceptable. This is at a time of increased demand, including in non-crime areas such as mental health. Our neighbourhood policing function, in common with every part of the PSNI, is shrinking, even though it's critical to so much of what we do. Like you, Deputy Chair, I warmly welcome the Justice Minister's announcement this week of additional resources for policing. £7 million secures the first year of our recovery business case. It allows us to recruit officers to address over a decade of decline as we strive to grow the organisation back to an initial 7,000 officers and 2,572 staff. Crucially, an additional £4.7 million that was provided allows us to pay the 4.2% pay award, which retains pay parity with our officers and colleagues in England and Wales. Although I'm delighted for our officers, the delay and uncertainty of this pay award each year has to be addressed. I've made clear that pay parity with colleagues elsewhere in the UK is non-negotiable. This award is no less than our officers deserve, and the announcement provides a vital and timely boost for a workforce which continues to achieve policing miracles in the face of relentless resource pressure. The recovery plan money is an important first step in addressing our immediate resourcing pressures, and I do want to echo your thanks, Deputy Chair, to the Minister and the Executive for this. I now want to briefly turn to Operation Canova. The Canova team published its final report on Tuesday, as you mentioned. I'd like to thank Sir Ian Livingstone and everyone involved in the Canova work for the meticulous professional investigation they carried out during the recent years. I also want to thank, and most importantly, the Canova families for sharing their experiences so openly with the team over those years. I remain forever grateful for everything they did to shape, support and inspire the Canova investigations. They are a remarkable group of people, and the Canova victims come from every background of those impacted by the Troubles. As I and others said on Tuesday, Canova has set the standard for how legacy investigations should be carried out, with oversight, governance and family and victim engagement. It has changed the legacy landscape. It is my sincere hope that Canova serves as the blueprint for future legacy work. I won't revisit my detailed public comments about some of the issues, the frustrations and missed opportunities which the report highlighted. I will, however, reiterate that although the final Canova report outlines the challenges of conducting legacy investigations, it also demonstrates that it is possible to find the truth of what happened for many victims and their families. Last night at Queen's University, I delivered the annual lecture for the Committee for the Administration of Justice, CAJ, on the stance of neither confirm nor deny. I strongly support NCND and have applied it throughout my policing career. However, it should be applied properly and ethically, and not in a blanket and totemic manner or to cover up wrongdoing. The lecture has been forwarded to the board this morning and is available on the CAJ and PSNI websites. During the lecture, I was delighted to announce the introduction of the new PSNI Public Interest Immunity, known as PII policy, that sets out the way this organisation will deal with sensitive information. The policy will also be published on the PSNI website. I will reiterate to this board my commitment that as Chief Constable, I'll continue to play my part in finding a joint solution to our troubled past. Dealing fairly and transparently with legacy issues is something we owe to all of the families who suffered during that difficult time. But legacy-related pressures continue to pose a significant challenge. Since 2014, the PSNI has incurred £167 million of costs supporting legacy cases, and I anticipate a further 24 million will be required in this financial year. These pressures are only increasing. There are 195 unsolved non-terrorist murders from 1996 to 2004 requiring review, and more than 1,100 civil litigation claims remain outstanding. In that context, the Northern Affairs Committee report on the government's approach to legacy, published at the beginning of this month, is both timely and important. The committee is clear in its assessment that legacy responsibilities cannot simply be absorbed into an overstretched policing budget without undermining both the integrity of legacy processes and the delivery of modern, community-focused policing. We are not funded to deal with legacy, and unless that changes, the recent and welcome legacy commitments from the government will be frustrated through the PSNI not having the resource to address the disclosure needs of the soon-to-be Legacy Commission. I welcome NIAC's recommendations for new, recurring and ring-fence government funding to meet our legacy obligations. I hope Westminster are listening. This is a measured cross-party proposal that reflects what I've been saying, that policing cannot be expected to carry these historic responsibilities without the stable, long-term funding required to do so professionally, transparently and fairly. As we approach the Christmas period, it's a depressing reality that a significant and growing focus for police in the coming weeks will be responding to violence against women and girls. On average, we receive 55 domestic abuse reports each day. That will significantly rise over the Christmas and New Year period. Over the 48 hours of Christmas Day and Boxing Day last year, we responded to 185 domestic abuse calls. And this is the tip of the iceberg. Research and experience tells us that many more incidents will have happened before the police are called. Behind every call is fear, harm, and too often children living with that experience. Our Violence Against Women and Girls Action Plan continues to drive meaningful improvement across the service. Now in its fourth year, the plan has strengthened our approach to prevention, protection, and pursuing perpetrators and preparing for the challenges ahead. Since the plan began, officers have made significant use of the new legislation to hold offenders to account, including making over 5,000 arrests for domestic abuse, stalking, and non-fatal strangulation. I want to clarify some recent reporting. In 2019, the BBC published an article using Eurostat figures, highlighting the number of homicides committed during 2017 by intimate partners across various European countries. The article placed Romania and Northern Ireland as the highest ranked countries for homicide by intimate partners for both male and female victims. The statement was incorrect. PSNI had provided the correct data to Eurostat. However, they quoted that there were 8 murders by an intimate partner in 2017 in Northern Ireland, where the correct figure was 4, 3 female and 1 male. Moreover, it was based on a single data point, the rate only for 2017. Homicide is a low volume crime, thankfully, and can vary significantly year to year. A single data point may not be reflective of any broader trend. Over the last 25 years, the rate of female homicides has been relatively consistent, most notably since the mid-2010s. It provides a rate currently of 0.6 per 100,000 female victims. This is significant as it matches the UN estimate for the average rate of female homicide in Europe. This would place Northern Ireland 23rd out of 36 countries in comparison to rates of female homicide, slightly behind the rate in England and Wales and above that in Ireland. Once again this year, PSNI took part in the international 16 Days of Action campaign, focusing on our Power to Change message. We'll continue to raise awareness and challenge gender-based violence with practical messages for officers and the public to call out misogyny, refer early, and remember the impact domestic abuse has on children. In the nighttime economy, we've launched a Project Vigilant, some of you will have seen, in Derry, Londonderry, aimed at identifying and stopping predatory behaviour before it escalates into a serious offence. Uniformed and plainclothes officers are working side by side around bars, clubs, transport hubs, intervening early when they see stalking, harassment, or other concerning behaviours. On Halloween night, officers made an arrest for upskirting and several timely interventions that protected vulnerable people, including a child. The Project Vigilant pilot will be expanded to Belfast as a key element of our seasonal policing operation, Operation Season's Greetings, which is now underway. Officers will be out across Northern Ireland, providing a visible presence to keep people safe, deter crime, and reassure the public. In addition to tackling violence against women and girls, our focus is on public safety, road safety, and preventing thefts and antisocial behaviour in busy shopping and nightlife areas. Partners such as Retail Northern Ireland, Translink, the Business Crime Partnership, and the hospitality sector and local councils have been integral to our planning of this operation. Regrettably, Deputy Chair, as you mentioned, another month had passed where we see serious violent assaults on police officers. On the 27th of November, 4 officers and a custody detention officer were seriously assaulted during an arrest. 1 officer was stabbed in the leg, requiring hospital treatment, while another was saved by their protective equipment when an assailant attempted to stab him in the torso. The outcome of this disgraceful incident could so easily have been much worse. I've spoken to each of those officers. Over the past year, there have been more than 2,600 assaults on police officers and staff, and well over 100 incidents where police vehicles have been rammed. These assaults have included sexual assault and an incident in which an HIV-positive detainee spat blood directly into an officer's face, an act that led to months of anxiety and medical treatment. There is a view in some quarters that assaults are part of the job. They are not. The Police Federation for Northern Ireland Let's Them Protect campaign highlights the courage and professionalism of officers and the impact these assaults have on policing and on our communities. This behaviour must stop. I'm heartened by the growing focus on the issue, and I welcome the Justice Minister's work in strengthening the legislation. I will ensure those who attack police officers and staff are pursued and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I'm now going to hand over to Deputy Chief Constable Bob Singleton and colleagues to lead you through outcome 2 of our policing plan, being community focused. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning, Deputy Chair. As you've said, today in our report, we're going to be talking about our progress across 7 indicators under outcome 2. I'm going to start this morning with a short summary on public confidence and indicator 2.1 before I invite Ryan, Melanie and Davy to provide short summary remarks on each of the areas that they've been leading on and that the board will be familiar with. Of course, all the indicators and measures in the plan are important, but confidence in policing is perhaps the most important because it isn't just a policing plan measure or an indicator, but it is in fact the lifeblood of our organisational philosophy of policing with the community, and it runs the whole way through this outcome as a whole. That philosophy itself is a fundamental recognition that community safety can't just be delivered by the police alone. It's only by working together with the public that we can actually achieve our policing mission and keep people safe. And that's because the level of public confidence directly impacts on the effectiveness of our service in preventing harm and keeping people safe, especially in areas where tension still exists within and between communities. It's this simple, Deputy Chair. Whenever confidence is strong, people report more, they engage more, and they work with us more readily in order to solve problems. When confidence dips, risks grow, including, in our context, the space that paramilitary groups and other actors seek to exploit. So in terms of the most recent data on public confidence, I'm encouraged that across all of our major surveys, whether it's the Policing Board's telephone survey, the Safe Community Survey, and indeed our own victim satisfaction work, the overall trend in confidence remains stable and largely positive. That stability is, given the very well documented funding and resourcing levels, not just noteworthy, but I think in that context, a very significant achievement. And in particular, when we compare our levels of public confidence with the sharp declines that have been witnessed in confidence reported across several police forces in England and Wales, Northern Ireland continues to demonstrate a statistically more resilient level of trust and confidence. And I think that is the most significant point, because fluctuations in or blows to public confidence are inevitable in policing, because we are human beings, we won't always get it right. And also because truly impartial policing won't, can't, and actually really shouldn't keep everybody happy all of the time. Confidence in policing isn't a popularity contest, and there is a risk of potentially confusing approval for confidence. So while statistically the measures of confidence have some use, they are really only ever just a snapshot moment of approval. And the real litmus test of actual confidence in policing is sustained and resilient relationships, even when our actions frustrate or disappoint sections of our community. If I was to sum it up, I'd say it this way. I'd say that confidence isn't credit, it's trust in reserve. And our trust reserves are the result of the sustained and ongoing investment in communication, engagement, and relationships through the mechanisms which we've set out in the report before you today. Of course, our ability to invest in communication, engagement, and relationships has undoubtedly been impacted by the overall financial and resourcing position. And whilst engagement is everybody's job, all of our teams that specialise in engagement and communication are now under-resourced and smaller than they once were. Perhaps the most obvious of those is our neighbourhood policing teams. And we've been clear in the past, but it's worthy, I think, of re-emphasising again today, and I'm sure we'll make this point almost repeatedly. But we think we have about half the level of neighbourhood police officers that we should have. Restoring neighbourhood policing numbers is, of course, one of the key objectives of our recovery business plan, and we again welcome the confirmation of the in-year funding for that. So alongside the statistical measures of confidence, it's our experience and our professional assessment of the depth of those trust reserves in both the first 9 months of this policing plan, but also in the context of that financial and resourcing challenge that have led us to conclude that we are making good progress in this area. And as we move forward into 2026, the blueprint for investment in trust and confidence will remain our Here For You public engagement vision, and its 5 pillars of attraction and recruitment, engagement, procedural fairness, effective neighbourhood policing, and local accountability. This strategy will, however, be refreshed next year. It won't fundamentally change, but one additional area of focus that will be included is around victims, and that will again align with our policing plan. So, Chair, I hope that was a useful summary for members of Indicator 2.1 and for the public watching. The full report is available online, but for now I'm going to hand you over to Ryan to take you through Indicators 2.2, 2.3 and 2.5.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Deputy Chair and members. And no surprise, we start with talking about confidence because as we talk through the other elements of the policing plan, all of them to a greater or lesser extent impact upon public confidence in policing. I'm going to start with talking about 2.2, which is how well we're working in partnership with communities, with stakeholders, with statutory and voluntary bodies. This is one that actually we haven't reported yet to the committees on. We'll do that in February of next year, but I want to give a flavour and a summary of where I think we are in relation to that. We'll look as a committee at the neighbourhood policing survey, which is just completing, will be analysed. That's a really good self-assessment of how our neighbourhood teams think that they're doing this work and a range of all data. But all of this starts with problem solving. And by that, I mean the actual tools and tactics and way to go about solving difficult problems within communities. We've invested pretty heavily through our neighbourhood policing faculty and training our frontline neighbourhood teams and others in the skills to do problem solving. And for those of you who have the chance to go to our problem solving awards, and we've had them, you'll have seen a range of initiatives from trying to tackle illegal money lending to illegal use of scramblers, protection of older people and others. And we look forward to the next problem solving awards ahead. And that problem solving is already embedded through well-established structures like our community safety partnerships, multi-agency support hubs that many of you will be familiar with, looking at the most vulnerable people, and some, I guess, flagship partnership programs such as ScamWise, which is a great partnership between ourselves, the board, financial institutions, and many others protecting those from scamming. Up and Compass, which is a partnership getting information to school principals and safeguarding leads as quickly as we can about young people who've been in a house where there's been domestic abuse and that might impact on their day in school. Just recently, I hosted an event with my leadership team with the Federation of Social Housing, and there we heard about work in Belfast with tenants having had persistent problems with antisocial behaviour in certain estates and developments, and the partnership work that was being done to reduce antisocial behaviour, crime, drug misuse within those. And then to the very local, just last week or very recently, down in Fermanagh, our neighbourhood team, and I have a whole list of things I could talk about and you will know about, working with a local GIA club in Belcoo to host a community wellbeing event, police in Belfast using sport as a platform to engage with young people around good decision making and good civic behaviour through Fresh Start, through sport. So the list goes on, and the great bit for us as a team is we get to see it all. I know you as a board hear it from communities just how much of that work goes on. I guess the question is, well, why do I think progress is adequate in relation to that? The start reality being our neighbourhood teams do incredible work. There's not enough of them. We're down in the region of around 400 just over neighbourhood officers. You know, and I know communities cry out to see more of them, and we're not delivering on that because of the budget situation. But it's not just enough police. We can see the shrinking of the other statutory partners working in those areas as well, and the ability for them to commit to problem solving is not where it was. We here in Northern Ireland cannot solve problems without the community and voluntary sector. we see, particularly in the young people's arena, the shrinking of the ability of youth groups to be able to do the work that they could do. And that work, and they work tirelessly and they work above and beyond, and we would be lost without them. But we share their frustration that they're not there in the numbers that they should be, which is why there's huge amounts of good work ongoing. We all get to see it, but we all want to do more and more. And I think that's frustration that we all share. Moving on to 2.3, how safe do people feel in their communities? We have for some time now spoken at the board about Northern Ireland being the safest place in the UK statistically, and sometimes people sort of raise an eyebrow or roll an eye when they hear that statistic. I guess the test of that is actually how safe do people feel? Does that pull through in terms of the data that we look at? And when I was last with the partnership committee talking through work in this area, the answer is yes. 9 out of 10 people saying that they feel safe in their communities. And that is great at a kind of broad level, and it's really good that people do feel safe. I think we all know that there are certain communities, certain elements of the community that do not feel safe, particularly women and girls walking our streets at night, and the Chief Constable has alluded to how important that is for us. That's why through work of Project Vigilant that the Chief has talked about is our commitment to recognise that some people feel less safe than others. Added to that is the work that's being done around our safer streets, the walk and talk work that we've done in Ballymena and other areas where members of the community, women's groups are invited to walk with local neighbourhood teams to point out the things that make them feel unsafe, be that on a river path, be that inadequate lighting, be that vehicles that are left abandoned, and to feed that through to an app which gives us a collective view as partners of where those issues are and allows us to do referrals to partners to be able to deal with some of those key issues. Critical work for us, new work and emerging work, but very important. Great work done in Belfast around student safety. All of us who have our young people getting a great education in our cities and universities, we want them to feel safe. That's something that the team in Belfast have worked really closely on with the universities and up in Derry to make sure that that works well. And that's been a really successful programme of work focused on that safety. Season's greetings happening at the moment, and hopefully you'll have seen, particularly in our city centres, an uplift in the policing footprint, yellow coats in and around that, and feedback has been very good actually thus far in relation to it. So great that people are feeling safe. The statistics say that we're feeling safe, but we all know that certain people in certain parts of the community feel less safe than others. That's where we're trying to target that work, supported by the real events, which are giving us a greater lens into where people are feeling unsafe. The second part of that report card that we discussed with the committee is how quickly that we're getting to calls, so our response times. I think you'll be startled by the fact that in terms of emergency calls and in priority calls, we're getting to those within our SLA, which is an amazing thing given the deficit of numbers that we have in our 24/7 teams. Why is that? Well, number one, our workforce is incredible. I mean, they work above and beyond every day to make sure they keep people safe. And that is what's driving that, being able to maintain those levels. And I want to pay tribute to them and thank them for that. The second bit is that we've got better at understanding what we need to go to when. How have we done that? Firstly, by putting more choice into the system for members of the public in terms of how they access their police service. So our new online reporting systems work well, they're quick, they're well received, feedback's good in them, and we're seeing growing numbers using those. That starts to reduce some of the demand into our contact centres via the phone and gives us more time to be able to understand that risk. We've reported to the board about our use of one video officer attendance team within Belfast Vote. That's giving more choice to the public in terms of how they want to receive the policing service, which again is allowing us to understand better about risk, harm, and how quickly we need to get to something. And we're growing that with the launch of a new vote in our south area in January, and then up in Ballymoney in March. We've added in a new response grade. Previously, we had emergency and priority. We've added in routine. We'll get to that within 4 hours. All of that has just started to give us more time and space to understand risk better. to make sure that we're getting the resources where they need to be at the right time, and that is why I think we are consistently meeting our SLAs in relation to those calls. Why then adequate? I mean, much of that technology is emerging and new, so we're just in the bedding in process of it. I'm sure we'll see it improve and grow, but the test will be just how consistently we keep maintaining those targets as we move forward through in the next 5-year reporting cycle. Moving on then to 2.5. Is the effectiveness in tackling repeat offending. It's clearly a key driver of confidence and how well we're dealing with repeat offenders. A repeat offender is someone who's had more than 2 crimes in a calendar or in a 12-month period. It's about 2,759 of those in Northern Ireland. That's actually dropped about 400 since March time of this year. The vast majority have committed 2 offences, around 1,400 of those. There's about 60 have committed more than 10, just to give you a flavour of the type of people that are in that cohort. We have dedicated resources within our reducing offending units within each district, whose work is trying to curtail the harm that those people are causing. At any one time, about 40% of that cohort are in prison, and they through the work that's done there. We fought hard to keep those units, given the pressures we have on resource. It would be easy to say that's a nice to do, but we feel it's so essential to reducing harm to communities and building confidence that we have the focus on that work. Why then adequate in terms of the assessment of it? Well, anyone who knows anything about desistance and stopping people committing crime repeatedly, there are things that they need in their lives. They need stability in terms of employment, stability in terms of where they're living, stability in terms of relationships, and a number of other things, dealing with addictions, etc., and often mental health vulnerability. That requires a real joined up partnership approach to it. I'm delighted that in the programme for government, we see reducing offending within that, and the Department of Justice are in the process of setting up a multi-agency group to help us take that work forward together, but it's in its early stages. That needs to happen and needs to drive forward to allow us to move to the next phase in terms of how well we're doing that. So thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Ryan. I'm now just going to ask Mel to summarise Indicator 2.6, which covers the work that we're doing, the working partnership to reduce deaths and serious injury on our roads.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Vice Chair. Members will recall that up to and including 2023, I was consistently reporting an upward trend in relation to the number of fatalities on our roads, which then plateaued out through 2024. This has been a strategic partnership for PSNI, a strategic priority, for PSNI for a number of years. And there are some green shoots in terms of the figures at the moment. So at the time of the report was submitted to the board, this calendar year we'd had seen 47 fatalities on the road. The up-to-date figures as of today are 51 fatalities on the road. So sadly, another 4 since the report was produced. And across the island of Ireland, we are mirroring the trend that there is a slightly small reduction. And down in the Guards are reporting 170 fatalities this year. As part of our work, we analysed the strategic trends across a 10-year period, and we identified a correlation between 2 important pillars of police activity and partnership activity that really impacted in reducing the number of those killed or seriously injured on the roads, that being the role of enforcement and the role of education. And both of those need to be equally applied to in order to start to turn that curve. But whilst I cautiously welcome the reductions, I am very mindful that we're entering a really critical time of year with longer, darker nights, with the change of the seasons and also the usual challenges that come through the Christmas period. So just to give a brief update on the Christmas period, particularly around drink and drug driving. So in 2025 so far, we have arrested 2,582 people for driving under the influence of drink or drugs across our roads. In the first week of the Christmas drink and drug drive operation, we made 52 arrests. That's Operation Limit, which is currently running. Last year, for the whole of the Christmas period campaign, we made 298 arrests. So it does look like there may be more arrests this year if the trend continues. Our analysis keeps us focused on the fatal 5. We are absolutely convinced that that's the area that we need to be focused on. So that is driving under the influence of drink or drugs, speeding, careless driving, use of seat belts and use of mobile telephones. And we continue to focus across those 5 key areas in order to make our roads as safe as possible. I think it is fair to say that most of the serious and fatal collisions that we go to is all as a result of driver choices and driver behaviours one way or another. It is challenging to keep that focus with the reduction in the number of officers that we've got within our roads policing unit. But to give board members a reassurance, we don't entirely rely on those officers as the only people who are discharging those responsibilities around delivering against this outcome and the strategic priority. So the tactical support groups are now routinely seen doing speed detection at the sides of the roads, as are local policing and neighbourhood policing teams. So there is a widespread effort in this, particularly at this time of year, with the Christmas drink and drug drive campaign, the darker nights and all of the factors that we know contribute. We are also working really cooperatively with Department for Infrastructure in the Strategic Road Safety Partnership, and that partnership takes core responsibility for our education, for our communication and from our marketing. And we are really, really encouraged that we've now gone back to those really impactful drink, drug and dangerous drive campaigns that I know we all watch on the television, and they do definitely make us think about the choices we make on our roads. In terms of looking forward, areas that we see as areas that we can really continue to drive and improve around offending behaviours, and I've made a formal submission in the past week to the Justice Minister for these key changes, is the first one is that we're pushing really hard for the introduction of the graduated driving licence scheme. This has been taken forward through DFI. We see newer drivers, probably predominantly younger drivers, because they're mainly the cohort that are the newer drivers, often disproportionately represent those involved in fatal or serious road traffic collisions. And we think the graduated driving licence scheme, where they know that they will be on notice to be withdrawn from their ability to drive on the roads, as a key deterrence for that grouping. At the moment, we are told that DFI have committed to introduce that by the end of this mandate, but we do see that as really not timely enough given the prevalence of newer drivers in those 2 sets of those killed or seriously injured on the roads. Secondly, I know that I've spoken to board members before about the fine that is attached to endorsable fixed penalty tickets for speeding. I believe that the level of fine currently does not act as a deterrence. So the level of fine in Northern Ireland is currently £60. In the Republic of Ireland, for a similar offence, it's €160. And in England and Wales, the fine is £100. In fact, it is the case now that most of the time it's more costly to commit a parking offence than it is to commit a speeding offence on our roads. And I don't think that that can be right in 2025. In relation to speeding, I'm updated on almost a daily basis now of people who are stopped speeding on our roads doing more than 100 miles an hour. And for most of those people, they tend to have other offences that go ancillary to this, such as failing to wear seat belts, using mobile phones and carrying passengers and often small children in cars. It's an absolutely shocking statistic, and there is no doubt that it's contributing to road safety on a significant basis. The last issue that I've raised with the department that I'm really keen to progress is the issue around the fact that there is no cross-border endorsement of driving licences for driving offences committed north and south of the border. And again, I see that as a key deterrence, that there has to be a penalty, whether you drive on an Irish driving licence or a UK driving licence, Northern Irish driving licence. It has to be that you get endorsement on your driving licence, because I think we all know that the endorsement and the impact on your insurance premium often becomes the biggest deterrence rather than actually the cost of the fine. In terms of continuing around the investment into the Road Safety Partnership, just lastly, I want to give board members a reassurance that it is entirely a partnership decision how the money that's generated from the road safety vans is reinvested. and there is a strong focus across that partnership into prevention, and actually the increase in the fines will significantly enhance the money that we have available to focus on preventative work. So in essence, the hard work continues, not just within my roads policing teams, but across all of the resources in the PSNI to make sure that we continue to make our roads as safe as possible for all of those that use them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. And then Davy will close out for us with outcomes 2.4 and 2.7, which examine the effectiveness in tackling terrorism, paramilitarism, and serious and organised crime groups.
Yeah, thank you. The update against impact measure 2.4 in respect of the effectiveness of tackling paramilitary activity, terrorism, and serious organised crime. I would start by pointing out that this year has been the first since records began with no security-related deaths. I think that's very welcome by all of us, both in policing but right across society as well. I think it's also important to point out that assaults attributed to paramilitary groupings are at the lowest level in over 40 years. And last year was the lowest level of shooting in the region of 17 years. However, the threat levels across Northern Ireland in respect of Northern Ireland related terrorism remain at substantial, which means an attack is likely. I think it's fair to say that paramilitary activity still persists, as does the coercive control, intimidation, and organised crime impacting on our communities. But we continue to devote considerable resource, energy, and commitment to tackling this issue. And I believe that the results that this has yielded warranted a grading of adequate progress against this measure. And I would want to place on record my thanks to our officers and staff for their continued hard work in respect of what is a challenging area for policing. This robust policing will continue. We have seen a reduction in the overall number of people charged in connection with organised crime, which I think again is indicative of the difficult resourcing position that exists across many of our specialist capabilities and detective cadre. However, we continue to prioritise our activity against the highest risk to communities. And again, whilst annual arrests and seizures incidents, particularly in respect of drugs, are down, the level of harmful commodities seized has increased, which again I think should give the board reassurance, and again is indicative of us targeting and prioritising the highest harm and upstream OCG activity across our communities. Northern Ireland related terrorism is decreasing, and this is long overdue, but it's welcome. And there are some signals of a desire for transition emerging from within loyalist communities. Again, I would say that that's long overdue. However, we are also seeing increasing levels of extreme right-wing terrorism and indeed international terrorism emerging. So it's absolutely important and crucial that we retain all the necessary capability and capacity to respond to these new and emerging threats in order to keep people safe across Northern Ireland. But again, just to be absolutely clear, we will continue to robustly address all terrorism, all paramilitary activity and organised crime, working with our partners. And I welcome the Director General of NCA here today, who no doubt will touch on some of these issues as well, but also working very closely with communities as well in this regard, and we're committed to doing that. In respect of 2.7, which is how we work in partnership to effectively tackle cybercrime. This is a new measure, an indicator on the policing plan, which reflects this new and emerging risk to communities through cybercrime. And again, this will be reported in early 2026 to the board and committees in due course. I believe it is therefore fair at this point to really challenge ourselves in policing in order to get the very best outcomes in regard to cybercrime. And that's why we have given ourselves at this point in time a grading of limited progress towards the outcomes. As part of this process, we are delivering our cyber transformation project. But again, recognising that full implementation of that project is dependent on securing the funding through the Executive Transformation Fund. And again, work continues with the Executive in that regard. And this will really help us ensure that we have the capabilities and are best placed to respond to this area of threat moving forward. But we're not sitting waiting on that funding. We're already doing what we can within the capacity and the funding we have to address these issues. Our processes have been enhanced, including a new digital forensic portal, allowing for more efficient and effective submissions, and an enhanced priority matrix, which really aid that identification of the more urgent matters. We have initiated a gatekeeping team, which has been put in place to provide consistent approach to these submissions and management of those. Automation is already having an impact, improving our capacity to process data from devices, and that work will be further extended as part of the transformation programme. And we have other developments that we have reported to the board as part of that transformation process that will come online on 2026. But we're also working with communities and organisations, including educational settings and victims, to support those who have been the subject of cybercrime and to educate and to better protect digital assets against this form of criminal attack. I've included in the report examples of investigations into cybercrime, and that includes a wide range of the issues that we face, including the possession of stolen databases, cryptocurrency, distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks, and again, working closely with NCA colleagues, we remain committed to full and complete investigations in those regard. And we are committed to, as I say, developing and rolling out that cyber transformation plan and enhancing our operational success moving forward. This is the first stage of our 5-year plan in this regard. So I do look forward to bringing more information back to the board, and hopefully we'll see that progress over time. And certainly we will report in early 2026 at the relevant committee. Definitely.
Thank you, Davy. And just a reminder, Deputy Chair, that the RAG status was a self-assessment carried out by the PSNI. It is a subjective judgment effectively made against the combined quantitative and qualitative performance measures that we've agreed for each of the impacts. It is subject to an internal levelling and quality assurance process through our Service Performance Board before it's transmitted onward to the various committees at the Policing Board, who then get a more detailed opportunity to explore in detail with the leads how they've arrived at that conclusion. And then, of course, ultimately today, we're presenting it to the board again and to the public in order to ask us questions in respect to that.
Thank you for a very comprehensive and very helpful presentation of progress to date against outcome 2. We have a number of questions just in relation to some of the issues that are arising from that. The first one is from Peter Osborne around confidence levels. Peter?
Thanks very much, Vice Chair, and thanks for the presentation as well. And just, it's not related to my question, but can I agree with a number of things that have been said, including the 2 recommendations from Mel around the fines and the north, south, east, west licensing issues, because those are deterrents, but they're not deterrents at the minute. On the confidence thing, I think it's really important also to recognise good work when it happens and decent statistics when they're there, and just to recognise the relatively high level of confidence there is in policing. I think there's a bit of a plateau on it, or whatever the word is. But it's high, and I think we need to recognise that, and that's partly because of the work that goes on the ground by many officers, as you've indicated. I think it's also important to recognise, as you've said, that these are challenges throughout these islands around confidence in policing, and that engaged communities lead to better outcomes. And that's why this is so important. I want to ask specifically around recruitment issues, because I also think that recruitment is an indication of engagement. And there are clearly, in my view anyway, still issues around, if I can use the phrase, working class communities. There are certainly still issues around some geographical areas in Northern Ireland. And I suppose I want to be sure that the police are taking seriously what the statistics are telling you about where there is less engagement by communities in policing, because that has knock-on effects on recruitment, and that has knock-on effects on engagement and outcomes if you don't get that confidence in policing through those geographical areas that we know about and those areas across the community that are particularly, I think, in working class areas. Convince us you're taking those statistics seriously.
So I can absolutely assure you we're taking that seriously, Peter. Obviously, thankfully, we started recruitment last year. It's the first time we'd had a campaign since 2021. And I'm delighted that we had nearly 5,000 applicants. Because we want to make sure we do this as well as we can, we've mapped every single applicant. So we understand exactly what areas we are getting strong applications from and where we're not getting applications. And we're looking to target those areas that we've not been receiving applications for the process that we are intending to undertake in February, for a new recruitment process. And it's not just working class communities. I've been concerned about loyalist working class communities. There's an ongoing issue, and I think it's linked to legacy, very much so, around nationalist communities. And we've got new and emerging communities, all of whom, through our strategic engagement team and the activity at every level of the organisation, and through the real events which many of you have been to, we are engaging with those communities in a really positive way. There's a letter I received, actually, which we'll share with the board. You may have had it. I said to share it yesterday, where we had a body come over to look at our community engagement because of the disturbances that we had in the summer. Their assessment is incredibly positive about the work that this organisation does with its communities, that it doesn't see elsewhere, to the point that the chair felt that they needed to write to us. So we're doing what we can, but I've always said it needs a whole systems approach, political parties, civic society, because being a post-conflict society, and we know that certain people feel disenfranchised, not having the same opportunities as others, we all need to work to make sure that everybody realises this is an organisation for everybody. And I know with the nationalist communities, and I have a very strong relationship with people in the nationalist community, there remains a concern about distant republicanism and threats to their children if they're going to join the police. And we've seen that in recent years, and we continue to see that. They are concerned about being ostracised by those communities, which still exist. These are all still real issues in society. And everyone around these two tables, have got to work tirelessly to address that. And finally, there has been a concern from the nationalist community that they won't have the same opportunities in the organisation, or they'll face unfairness or bias. And our recent workforce survey, which had over 50% of the workforce respond, showed that for all the times that you often see on social media concerns about behaviours, that the organisation is not sectarian, the organisation is not racist, and it's a really positive survey. We are planning various activities in the lead up to the recruitment campaign to distill all of that, to target the communities that we feel are currently not applying for the organisation. I'm actually visiting a number of schools next week, which would ordinarily probably not be visited by the Chief Constable of PSNI, because it's never too early to try to get people to understand how important as a public service policing is. So we have a plan. Things don't happen overnight. This has been a problem wrestled with for the last 25 years. But I'm confident over the next few years we will see progress. I maybe just need to ask Pamela or Claire if they want to add any details.
I'm going to be interruptive here and say, no, just this is a topic we will return to in February when we're looking at representativeness and workforce, and an opportunity then for Pamela and Claire to contribute to the situation. I want to move on to the next question because I'm just conscious of time, and that's from Linda Dillon on cybercrime. Thank you.
Specifically in relation to, it's probably for yourself, Davy, to be honest with you, in relation to the OPONI report around the Alexander McCartney case, and I just want confirmation that in terms of devices that we are getting in terms of violence against women and girls, it has been given equal, at least equal attention and priority to organised crime and paramilitary. So I want that reassurance here today, and that when did that change, because it was very clear in the OPONI report that that was an issue that and we've talked about resources plenty, but it's how we use the resources that we have. And then just in relation to the cybercrime in general, you've said limited progress, and I understand this is our first time measuring, and we should be cautious around that. But is that due to a failure to work with specialisms outside PSNI? Because we may not have the specialists that we require in-house, and if we need to be working outside PSNI, then that's what should be done. Again, looking at best use of resources, of the limited resources that you have.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And I'll refer back to maybe some of the points that I covered at 2.7 that give hopefully a broad outline of the framework around cybercrime and how we are dealing and grappling with many of those issues, but directly to touch on the McCartney case and the Ombudsman report. And as always, I will welcome, the recommendations and the comments from the Ombudsman, particularly in respect of the comments that were raised that effectively highlighted our resourcing and our capacity issues around cybercrime. That's an issue that is, no stranger to us. We have known we've been under significant pressure around some of those specialist detective posts for a number of years and been working hard to try and fill those gaps. Hence, the recovery plan is absolutely crucial, not just for neighbourhood policing, but then that feeds on through to the rest of the organisation because they're interlinked. One part of the organisation cannot work in isolation. And the Cybercrime Centre, as you will know, having visited it, or the board has visited, we will have seen how the work there is not just about crime department. They support, the entire organisation, and most investigations now will have some element of CCTV, phone downloads, etc., etc. So it's really a high level of connectivity right across the organisation. And we have made progress, certainly with the support of my colleagues around the table here. I have been given permission to effectively recruit another 26 officers in the public protection branch between now and March. So that's the start of our recovery, and that's the start of us starting to feed those officers into some of those specialisms. And some of those officers will go to cybercrime, will go to the child internet protection team, and will go to the grading teams that sort of analyse those images, etc. So that's the kind of step in the right direction. The Ombudsman report also identified issues, as you point out, around prioritisation. I think it's important we put that in a degree of context as well, because prioritisation is very easy to say, but in reality, it can be challenging to actually deliver, particularly when you're faced with some of the challenges we have had. So, for example, we had the Laura McKee murder in 2019. We had Operation Arbacia between 2018 and 2020, which took down effectively the leadership of the new IRA, which feeds into what I was able to report earlier about real advances around safety and security and our tackling of terrorism in that regard. We had the John Caldwell attempted murder in 2023, and the impacts of some of the disorder we have seen, both in August 2024 and June, again, effectively divert attention and put strain on the capacity within cybercrime, because we have to respond to those incidents and issues and investigations. But we are committed in terms of prioritisation around violence against women and girls. The McCartney case, I suppose, was one of those touchstone moments where I think it was the first investigation of that scale and type. So our learning has really fast forwarded from that. And certainly over the last 2 years, we have put a significant focus around that prioritisation around violence against women and girls. So when I talk about the new gatekeeping system, the new submissions process, the monthly review in terms of those submissions, all of those are to address the prioritisation, how we manage and make sure that those issues don't get sort of continually knocked down the order of sort of delivery, and so that we can sort of reprioritise those, bring those cases back to the right place that they require to be. But it is a pressure. And you mentioned what are we doing externally. So again, this is not something, and we have had conversations nationally and again with NCA around these very issues. This is not a phenomenon that is just impacting on PSNI. It is impacting nationally across policing. So there is we have looked at the mutual aid opportunity, but again, there is not capacity across national policing to assist us in this regard. They're experiencing the same problems. We're also looking in terms of externally, what can we do to try and progress and fast track some of this analysis. Again, that is not cheap. And a recent piece of work that we conducted indicated that just under £1 million would take for around 14 months of support from an external company. So there's no easy solution to this. I think the solution lies within the work we're doing, both in terms of the transformation project, the restructuring around our cyber centre and our cyber forensic unit. That is the direction of travel we're going on, but we will continue to analyse those sort of results, and should we need to revisit some of those external providers, well, we will certainly seek to secure the funding to do that.
Thanks, David. Director General, would you like to make any comments just in terms of lessons across other forces?
I mean, just quickly on that point, I mean, the Alexander McCartney case, and I've not read the OPONI report on this yet, but it was massive. I mean, we've had a few of them of roughly that size across the UK, but this is one of the biggest. So any force will kind of struggle to have resourced that and moved as quickly as we'd have liked. And particularly as you get into it and find more and more victims to safeguard. I mean, a really big challenge. We did kind of support on that case. I think one of the things we need to reflect on is whether we provided enough support there, and we will do that. But this is taking a step back from it, just a more general challenge. I mean, you'll hear from me in a second. We have challenges across a whole series of different threats, but one of those areas is the whole myriad of online crimes, including examples like this, that we are having to prioritise. And as Davey said, that is a really big challenge for policing right across the UK.
Okay, thank you. Our final question in relation to outcome 2 is on roads policing, and that's from Keith.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. My question is 2.6. There are 2 parts to this. In the response, you've indicated adequate progress, and I appreciate it's maybe a difficult one to score. How does adequate become good? We're talking about numbers on a page, but they're not numbers on a page, they're people's lives. So what needs to make that changed? I'm not an email, obviously. What needs to change to make it into good? And then the second part of that question, obviously, Bobby has done some media recently regarding the ramming incidents of police vehicles. That sends out a strange signal across Northern Ireland of the behaviour of drivers towards police, never mind other road users. So if you cover both that, what would make a change from adequate to good? What needs to happen? And some maybe conversation with respect to what's going on with respect to that ramming of police vehicles, and what the work and the benefit of that camera equipment is going to benefit all our road users.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I think adequate to good would be a significant reduction in the number of people who are killed or seriously injured on our roads. I think there's a moderate reduction, and I described it as green shoots. But I think until we see sustained downward trends, I think that, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't think we've cracked this by any stretch. And I think as well, the other thing from a qualitative side was if we're getting wide-scale evidence or feedback that actually driving standards and behaviours on our roads are changing and improving. So I think we've all seen maybe post-COVID increased impatience, increased risk-taking, people going for overtakes, pulling out of junctions when there simply isn't room. So I think seeing, sustained reduction in the number of people who speed on the roads, more consideration, more cautious driving. Some of that will be qualitative. Some of that would also be shown by some of the results from the speed detection vans and the enforcement at the side of the road that we do. So I think all of those aspects together would give us a real picture of safer roads through improved driving standards and a reduction in those killed, seriously injured on our roads. So that would be my assessment. So I think green shoots at the moment, but no way complacent in terms of the direction of travel. In terms of the vehicle rammings, I think it's always going to be challenging when people will seek to escape the jurisdiction across the border, and it is particularly an issue at the border areas. And I think it perhaps also links in a little bit towards officer assaults and that willingness to take very direct, forceful action to avoid being arrested or to obstruct being arrested. So we're working hard on the cross-border strategy to make sure we are effectively working across that border. We have particular offenders who are persistently crossing the border and offending on both sides of the border. And I would want to reassure board members that for those particular people that we identify, we have a really joined up approach so that there is no escape across the border, and that if they do that, they will be effectively intercepted at the other side of the border by our colleagues and vice versa. So that effective working across the border areas is very, very important. And also making sure we've got a cross-border investigative response. So if we get a vehicle that escapes the jurisdiction in the north, that we actually recover that vehicle from the south, we harvest all the forensic opportunities to make sure that we bring offenders to justice effectively. There might be conversations when the timing is right about some kind of cross-border pursuit strategy. Again, that would take a long time to politically agree because of the independence of the two jurisdictions. But it's perhaps something that we can look at around what happens in other countries and sort of to soften that border and mean that if they were immediately in pursuit, there wouldn't be a hard line that they could get across either way and escape being arrested or being brought to justice. But I think the cross-border strategy and the cross-border working is absolutely essential. And I would want to reassure board members that officers that work in those border areas are constantly in discussion with their colleagues from the south to make sure that we effectively manage people who are committing crime across the borders.
Thank you. That concludes our questions on outcome 2. So we're going to move on now to questions on general policing issues. And our first question is from Les in relation to the Langdale report.
Thank you, Chair. Chief, the board welcomes the commissioning of the independent Rachel Langdale KC report into PSNI policies and practices around violence against women and girls. Really just 3 quick questions. 1, when will it be published? 2, what are the arrangements for the board seeing it? And 3, when can we expect a plan based on the issues raised in it? Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Thanks for the question. Well, firstly, just to be clear, I did say this, the commissioning of this, which is really important to this organisation, is so that we can improve how we deal with violence against women and girls, allegations of domestic abuse, misogyny. It's got an external and an internal element to it. In order that people can speak candidly and Rachel can report openly, this is not a published report. This is a PSNI report, but it will be shared with the board. It will shape our future approach to violence against women and girls. It will shape our tactical plan. Rachel has got the report at the moment. I'm hoping to get it back before Christmas. It might be the new year. I would imagine for the purposes of the board, it will be something that we'll be discussing in February, subject to timeliness of the board, and it will go through the committees. But there's an absolute commitment to make sure that this, and there's been utter candour with members of the organisation and partners as well, will provide us with a real understanding about the work we need to do. And I have to say, in some of elements of the report, I'm expecting it to be quite a hard read, but that's important because if you don't have that sort of scrutiny and openness around how you're approaching issues, then you're not going to improve how you're approaching those issues. But I'd hope to share it with the board in the early part of the new year.
Okay, thank you.
15 seconds.
Okay. Go.
Thanks, that's really welcome. My quick comment is I get the issue of people being candid and therefore it may not be published, but I think there needs to be some putting the issues in the public domain that may well protect hard messages that you're getting, but something needs to go into the public domain. And it's whether it's the full report or something that the public can understand what the issues are.
So, Chair, I know we're against time. that is all, it was always been the intention. I said that from the get-go, that we would make sure the fruits of the report were made public, but so that the report can show us warts and all what's going on, Rachel was able to report candidly, and that would not be for public consumption because the people who have trusted in her and spoken to her.
Okay, thank you. We have two questions on the general theme of violence against women and girls. The first is from Deirdre Hargey, and the second is from Cheryl Brownlee, and we'll take them together and I can have an answer at the same time. Deirdre.
Yeah, thanks very much. And obviously it is around the issue of violence against women and girls. And we had a presentation last week from Davy and the stats team around sexual offences. And obviously these are on the rise. It's also been reported today that there's a rise around far right elements and obviously so-called vigilantes who are using some of these incidents for misinformation. And I suppose when you look at the statistics that over 70% combined in terms of sexual offences are by people that know, a partner or a family member, and over 70% are in a private place. So I suppose it's just to ask what the PSNI are doing to counteract some of the misinformation that's out there, particularly online, and I suppose it might link into some of the cyber stuff. And the other concern as well is around, the Chief Constable touched on predatory behaviour. And if you have concerns even internally in terms of policing with any of the referrals that you have had to make yourselves to the police ombudsman around predatory behaviour or indeed dismissals in terms of some misconduct. And I suppose what do you see that as an issue and what you're doing to try and counteract and combat it? Thanks.
Thank you. And Cheryl?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all for the comments so far. Mine is around, in the action plan, it details that there was 5,000 arrests for domestic abuse, stalking and non-fatal strangulation. But what we're seeing, whilst arrests are high, convictions remain low. So where do you think this breakdown is occurring? What effect is this having on public confidence / trust? And what engagement has taken place with yourselves and relevant stakeholders to address these barriers and encourage people to come forward with these crimes? Thank you.
Well, I'll start and we will hand to Davy. So with regards to the misinformation online, this is part of the new challenges of society. And you will know from the events last August and Southport and what was said immediately after that, that led to an escalation across towns in England, and we saw serious disorder here. I have to say, even there was a real tragic event in Northern Ireland where a family of 3 were murdered by the father and partner, and online there was misinformation that that offence had been committed by an immigrant. This is a incredibly difficult space. And it's not just the responsibility of the police, but everybody to make sure that we step up and challenge misinformation. And one of the things I'm very clear with, and it goes with the new code of ethics here, and I extend it to this organisation as how we communicate outwardly, is that duty of conduct. We won't shy away from challenging misinformation. The important thing as well, and there was a very recent conviction, you'll have seen it in the media, involving Mr. Barton, that we need to challenge those who are doing this by taking them through the criminal courts. And I think legally we're still finding our feet on that around the criminal justice process to make sure that this line between freedom of speech and intimidation, victimisation and threatening behaviour is something that we need to be very proactive around. And I can promise you we are, hence the growth in our cyber capability and some other covert investment that I don't want to talk about in the board. The issue around internal matters around misogyny or inappropriate behaviour, we had an officer convicted of an indecent assault quite recently. I dealt with his fast track hearing. Obviously it didn't take me very long to deal with that. He was dismissed from the service. The internal survey, again, that we've done, which the board may have had some briefings on already, but it's going to be made public, does reflect some behaviours that we would not want in policing, but not to any levels that caused me any particular concern. The readout to me was that the organisation is not misogynistic, it's not racist, it's not sectarian, but one case is one case too many. And we know there will have been cases, a number of female officers and members of staff have come to see me, and I have introduced them to Rachel Langdale, and she's had private conversations with them. A lot of what she has done will shape and reinforce the importance of how robustly we deal with these issues. She has looked at all of the disciplinary cases around misogyny within the organisation. So her report will make a finding around how we have dealt with those. The important thing, and it's a message, this is a public forum, and I think we have now got this message across, that any such behaviours are absolutely abhorrent and unacceptable. And I'm increasingly confident, and the survey shows this. The survey shows that our staff, police officers and staff, are twice as likely to report inappropriate behaviour, twice as likely as the average for forces in England and Wales. But the details of the report, and it goes into a lot of detail, is something that I know you'll absorb in slower time. On the issue, remind me now, Cheryl, I've just lost my note.
The disparity between arrests and prosecutions.
Yeah, so listen again, and this is something Anthony will have a view on, I'm sure, as well as Davey, but I'm conscious of time. There are a number of pinch points where I think we lose the chance to secure convictions. Okay, the main one is the trust and confidence of the victim in the criminal justice process. A significant issue with that is the timeliness of the criminal justice process. There are lots of other ingredients around bail. There are lots of ingredients around how the various sectors that support victims are notified and are able to support those victims. A lot of this goes down to the resourcing of those organisations as well. This again does link to the Langdale review. Rachel has spoken to all of those organisations who are involved in the timeline of looking after, supporting domestic abuse victims. So our referrals to the Rowan are down. So why are they down? Rachel's looking at that. So the report, I think, will crystallise lots of things and patterns and trends that we should be concerned about and how we need to address them. And obviously I've seen an early version of the report, and that work has already started to happen. And that openness, that determination of a shared endeavour with those partners to put where we can things right that don't, it's not about resourcing, it's about systems to make sure referrals are properly happening. They will all bleed from the Langdale report.
We don't have time. Sorry, we're going to move on to the next question, which is from Nuala. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief. There has recently been an additional podcast into the murder and investigation of Katie Simpson, and it was released just this past weekend, and in it a number of additional allegations that have been made. And I just wanted to know at this time whether you could inform the board whether there are any current live investigations, which, I mean, they don't have anything to do with the inquest. If there are any current live investigations from the police into the murder of Simpson and the subsequent investigations that took place.
Yeah, I'm conscious there is still a OPONI investigation live, but outside of that, at this minute in time, that there is no live investigations underway. Clearly, we will review all information as and when that's appropriate and consider any potential further issues, but at this minute in time, no.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now to the theft of ammunition from Steeple. We have two questions on that, and we'll take them together. The first is from Gerry Kelly, and the second is from Patrick somewhere. Yes. Gerry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief Constable. I mean, just let me say from the start, I understand that there's ongoing investigations going on, so this is a more general question as opposed to directly towards that, even though some of it is appearing in the papers and that. But I was wondering, what's took me by surprise, some of the stuff that's appearing, how many licenses can a single person have for weaponry, whether that's short arms, semi-automatic weapons, fully automatic weapons, and is there a limit on that? And for an individual I'm talking about here, obviously, for an individual, and I'm talking about legal weapons, obviously. It's illegal weapons or illegal weapons. So is there any work done on that? And is there a legal limit on what you can do? And that of course would go because of the headlines around ammunition as well. Yeah.
And do us take Patrick's question at the same time?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you for the briefing so far. My question relates to audit more than anything else. I think a number of audits have taken place since 2018 in the area of firearms and ammunition, but none of them seem to have covered this sort of area. So I'm just wondering, in a sort of Donald Rumsfeld sense of the unknown unknowns, how can we be assured that the overall PSNI audit plan covers everything that it needs to, bearing in mind that something like this has gone through without being covered in an audit?
Thank you, and I think both very good questions. The first one, I'm actually going to ask Mel to answer for brevity and time, I'm conscious. The second question, I will ask Bobby to respond. What I will say is Chief Constable Simon Chesterman, and I think we may have shared a terms of reference, who's the lead for Firearms National Police Chiefs Council. I've known Simon for many years. I rang him almost immediately to see if he'd come in and do a full review. We will share that terms of reference with you and with the Department of Justice to make sure whatever lessons we can learn, we do. What I will say though, I'll countenance this. You can never sometimes take account of what some of your staff will do, whatever measures you put in if they're devious enough. But I'll be careful what I say beyond that. But let's start with Gerry's question and Mel around numbers of firearms. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Gerry. Just to correct the record, there is no legal fully automatic weapons. So you cannot legally hold a fully automatic weapon. You just mentioned that in the question. Secondly, the firearms order of 2004 covers the legislation around firearms licensing. There is no legislative limit on how many weapons a single person can hold. But there is criteria to say that the firearms licence holder must be a fit and proper person and must have good reason for holding the weapon. And we do apply the good reason test for every time that they ask to put another weapon onto the licence. There are, however, restrictions on how many weapons a firearms dealer can hold. So they are covered in terms of a top limit on that. So I think that probably answers the question. So the fit and proper person and the good reason are both applied to on every occasion. So it might be that a firearms licence holder starts off wanting, 2, 3, 4, and then asks for another, and we go back round the good reason. It's not unusual for people who are enthusiasts or sporting firearms licence holders to seek to hold multiple weapons for multiple disciplines.
Chair, can I just apologise? I want to ask Mark McNaughton, because it's an audit question, Patrick's, if Mark can answer that. Is that all right?
Okay, Mark.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Patrick. And it is a fair question, one of which we've asked ourselves, of course. And members will be aware we have a 3-year rolling internal audit strategy covering all areas of our business. And of course, it covers firearms and the use of ammunition as well. But the programme of work is very much risk-based. We can't cover all areas every year. And basically, it's developed on the basis of what we do know. So it's around the policing plan and our risks are controlled framework and any known weaknesses. And as we arrive at that strategy, it's a result of conversations with the executive team, but also with our non-executives, the audit committee, key stakeholders such as yourselves and the department, and indeed the audit office. So that programme is there. It's over 500 days per annum. So it is very comprehensive, a significant investment for us. And it does lead at the end of the year to an overall assurance from our head of internal audit. And in the most recent year, that was overall satisfactory. However, it did include a number of limited areas. And one of those was around actually PPWs and ammunition. So we were aware of a weakness in that area. But I think, as the Chief has pointed out, no system of control will ever eliminate the risk of fraud and theft. And no system of audit will either guarantee us that all these issues will be identified. But the review is now in place, and I'm confident that it will cover the entire breadth of ammunition and firearms, not just in the areas that we had already planned within the programme. And obviously, if there's any lessons or recommendations for improvement for that, that will be subject to our internal audit work. So it will lead to obviously an improved system now that we know it. And it has certainly alerted us to look into other areas, but it is very much risk-based. And when a risk materialises, obviously that comes then within our purview.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Colin McGrath, and it's on Operation Canova.
The Canova report confirmed that MI5 had received all stick knife intelligence, and then it's abundantly clear that MI5 lied when it said that it was peripheral, while all along it was actually tasking the British Army. MI5 knew of his and crimes of the IRA and did nothing. And MI5, and I quote, tried to restrict the investigation and conceal the truth of IRA crimes that it knew about. Given that there's been some further references in the likes of the McCullough report, does it not all confirm that there needs to be a root and branch review of MI5's actions and conduct here, including the current PSNI and MI5 MOU?
Thanks for the easy question. So listen, firstly, I want to point out that MI5 are a remarkable organisation, and the Director General, Ken McCallum, and I have known each other 25 years, and he is an outstanding individual and leader. I got a number of questions on this last night, and I will point you to the lecture that I gave around NCND. I think this is about cultural issues. MI5 are doing so much work to keep society safe, and I know they're driven by values and ethics. But in Northern Ireland, there is what I describe as a blind spot. And it's to do with the fact that on one side of the troubles were the security forces, who, by the way, invariably, in my experience on Canova, acted outstandingly. And we should never forget the sacrifice of the security forces and their families. But where we got things wrong, where things happened that should not have happened, they should not be covered up. They should not be hidden from view. Any well-functioning democracy would ensure that those issues are surfaced so that we could learn from them. So I am certain we're on a journey around how we deal with legacy. There's new legislation that's already changed from very recent legislation about how legacy was to be addressed. And I think the report needs to be digested by various organisations, including government. You know, I'm involved in conversations to try and change how some of these approaches are taken, and I'm hoping that we will be in a better and more confident place moving forward. And I don't think there's a lot more I can say than that. But I can talk for this organisation and the issuing of our public interest immunity policy, the determination, by the way, to protect the neither confirm nor deny stance, because it is vital to protect lives, to protect methodology. I'm the hugest advocate for it, but it should be applied intelligently and proportionately, and it should never be applied where it is done so to hide wrongdoing. So I don't think there's very much more I can say than that.
Okay, thank you, Chief Constable. Our next question is from Patrick Nelson, and it's about extortion on building sites.
Yes, thanks, Chair. You know, going from sort of one sort of level to another, really, with this, this is almost like perhaps one of the oldest issues in the book. So some recent media reports have suggested that extortion, paying for protection, is rife, and in fact, if not rife, let's just use prevalent around things like building sites here in Northern Ireland. I'm just wondering if the PSNI senior executive team or service executive team considers this to be a big and significant issue at the moment, and if so, what is the plan to try and eradicate it?
So I will, because of brevity and the Vice Chair is up against the clock here, What I would say is I'm certain this is an underreported crime, Patrick. There's no doubt about it. And it's not just in that nature of that business. It's not just a Northern Ireland issue. And I think very much some of this will be linked to paramilitary activity. But let me hand you over to Davy to give you a more fuller answer.
Yeah, thank you. And I would just echo the Chief's remarks, very much underreported. And I think, again, it's indicative of still the coercive control that exists within communities, particularly around the paramilitary issue. Our strategy to deal with this is effectively based on the PCTF, with the recognition that that coercive control exists. That includes extortion, blackmail, etc. And I think that that's the best mechanism that we address that. What I would say is, and use this opportunity to encourage people, if they are subject to that type of crime, please come and talk to us. We have specialist detectives that will support them. This is not about putting people at risk. We will support them. We will talk them through a process. And we will, as a victim-focused organisation, seek to do what we can to support them through those issues. Ultimately, this is about Northern Ireland being a success in terms of jobs, employment, the economy, etc., all of which has an impact. So we are key to play our part in that, but we need people to talk to us around these issues more widely than they are. I think it is linked to illegal money lending, and we are starting to see some progress and success in terms of our application and our endeavours in that regard. Again, very much underreported, but we secured money from the Treasury to for a dedicated post around illegal money lending. That officer has been doing a lot of work in terms of engagement, outreach, working with credit unions, etc., to build up relationships, confidence, and we're starting to see that flowing through in terms of increased levels of reporting. Overall, if we could, in terms of criminal offences, we're talking about the criminal offence of blackmail. This year to date, we've in the region of 700 reports of blackmail. The vast majority of those would be sextortion type reports, not specific to what you're talking about here. Very small numbers, and people are very reluctant to engage with us, but I would encourage people to talk to us.
Thank you, Davy. Our next question is from Peter Osborne, and it's on right-wing terrorism. Or extremism, sorry.
Just in the interest of time, Chair, do you want to let that leak into the NCA stuff?
I was going to draw the Director General into that, into the answer, so you can ask your question.
Okay. Well, I think it was noticeable, Chief Constable, in your report that you talked specifically about right-wing extremism and the impact, and I'm assuming that is something that is common in GB as well, and you might want to touch on that. I suppose for me it was trying to understand what leakage there is from GB to Northern Ireland around that. I think the online space is a significant part of that, and people may not be committing crimes online, but it maybe encourages others into criminality offline, especially younger folk. And I wonder how much you think that is leading to radicalisation in some ways of younger folk, not just in terms of recent racism crimes, but radicalisation that we're more familiar with in this part of the world over the last number of years too.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Peter. I think it reflects the shifts that we're seeing, and we'll look back in time around how crime is now undertaken and how people are influencing and radicalising using the internet. We had an incredible presentation by Dr. Sujan Gul in the PSNI, and we did a joint event with PwC, who brought a lot of stakeholders around misogyny. And that was also linked to right-wing extremism. And it was also linked to international terrorism, about how women are treated in certain cultures. Look, this is a real challenge. What I will say, right-wing extremism is a growing concern, but all extremism is. We know in the UK and globally the impacts of extremism on loss of life and the impact on people's lives by being exploited. There's been a threefold increase in right-wing extremism related investigations by MI5. Young people, especially young men, are vulnerable to these extremist groups, and that's one of the reasons why we brought Dr. Gul in to explain some of what he has seen. So online activity plays a major part in shaping extremist views. We know that. Our casework, no matter what the ideology, bears it out in almost all of our investigations now. It's not necessarily something either that is a UK challenge, it's a global challenge. We see this far wider than the UK and of course Europe as well. And you'll have seen reporting recently around the diversity of the threats that we face, in that a recent cross-border investigation with the AGS, which happened pretty spontaneously, saw individuals from Northern Ireland plan an attack on a mosque in Southern Ireland. And social media posts have also shown individuals threatening local elected representatives recently, which is part of another investigation that we're dealing with. So we see so many forms of exploitation, the use of the internet to intimidate and put fear in other people. And it's an area that's linked to the cyber work we're doing and the investment that we're making to make sure we get ahead of these issues. But it's not, and I just want to talk actually very briefly about the instance that we saw in June. And I know there's been some recent reporting around that prosecution with regards to the withdrawing of it. Again, that was another example of what you see on the internet with regards to inciting hateful behaviours against specific communities. And those hateful behaviours were based on complete lies and a misrepresentation of the truth. So it's a challenge, and it's one of the narratives linked to Deirdre's question, really, where we, and it's not just the PSNI, it's law enforcement generally, the NCA, our intelligence agencies, have got to become quicker and far more robust in putting out contra narratives and correct narratives and the truth around some of the stuff that's happening online. And that's one of the things that fed out of the lecture that was done by Dr. Gould. And we're looking at ways that we can do that to counter those narratives more quickly. Some of them are difficult for us to see because they're on encrypted networks and closed platforms. It's really difficult for us to penetrate. But that's another challenge that we now face, especially from this organisation's perspective. I talked at the beginning of this board meeting about us having a 40% reduction with regards to non-pay costs. That's about investment. And we've not been able to invest in the way others have been able to invest. And of course, the financial picture moving forward is no more optimistic than it's been this year. So there are more challenges for that. And that, again, I suppose comes down to priorities of how we're going to spend the budget that we do get for the next financial year. But I think my colleague to my right, Graham, will see this from a national and international perspective. And then Davey might want to add some more local nuances.
Thanks, Chief. And so, yes, to your question, do we see this in GB as well? As the Chief said, this is actually global too. So the Chief and I were with the Guards Commissioner last week. They are seeing it in the Republic, and you mentioned an example there. I was with the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police 2 weeks ago, seeing exactly the same thing there. And with all the police chiefs that I speak to around the world, they are seeing this. There is a rising tide of extremism of various sorts, and some of it is, right wing, some of it is left wing, some of it doesn't really have an ideology; it's searching for something, and then some of that does then end up manifesting in terrorism. So last year. And I should say, actually, I don't have a specific responsibility for terrorism or extreme right-wing investigations in the UK. That sits with MI5 and CT Police, but I'm kind of part of that world, so I know a fair bit about it. So last year, 1 in 5 arrests for attacked offences, so for terrorism offences, I'm not sure if that's in GB or UK as a whole, actually, but were for children, for people under the age of 18. And a few years ago, that was 1 in 20. So it has really changed. And some of those were really serious. And some of those would have been viewing material, which was of terrorist content. Some of them were absolutely terrorist planning as well. So that has really changed. But it is not, and John's touched on this already, it is not purely people who are extreme right wing or terrorists. It is children who are going online, who are through the way algorithms work, seeing more and more extreme content, who are getting into chat groups, some of which are encrypted and so beyond anyone's visibility, some of which aren't. So they're either radicalizing themselves through the algorithms or radicalizing each other in small groups, and often to no particular intent. I mean, they flit from one group to another, one ideology to another. We've seen that in a number of cases. Now, this presents a big challenge in lots of ways. I mean, what legislative framework are you using to tackle them? How do we see it in the first instance? One of the challenges that institutionally, all of our organisations need to make sure we are not looking down our individual silos, right? We are worried about child sexual exploitation. We are worried about misogyny. We are worried about domestic abuse. We're worried about cyber offences. We're worried about different types of terrorism, or actually, or maybe it's not ideological, therefore it's just a school shooting that doesn't have an ideological focus to it. Children and young people are just moving across that spectrum of different type of badness. And we have got to be kind of moving with them and looking right across that. And that is really challenging. We are trying to make sure that we are working across organisations to do that well. But that is the new world that we are in. And we are not at the moment well set up to do it. Organisationally, as I said, that's challenging. We do not have good mechanisms for dealing with it. So in GB, we've got the Prevent programme for terrorism, which it doesn't work all the time at all, but is a tried and tested evidence-based way of trying to de-radicalise people who have got involved in certain types of terrorist ideology. When there isn't a fixed ideology that they have attached themselves to, it's really quite hard to have a prevent method of putting support around them and mentoring and education to move them off something that is vaguer and more diffuse. So we are struggling with that. We're struggling with the legal framework. There's quite a lot of join up to do across not just the law enforcement community, but with education, with health, with children's services, to make sure we're able to support all the individuals that we do manage to identify when we do, and get the right wrapper around them. So when someone is obviously going down a path to terrorism, there is a mechanism to do that. For all those broader, more diffuse categories that might end up committing cyber attacks or persuading young girls to harm themselves, we don't have that kind of good wrapper. We don't have that evidence base around how we deal with it. Absolutely, it comes back to the tech firms and the online world that Deirdre asked about as well, which is really worrying to me. The massive opportunity, obviously massive benefit to society from it, but some really significant ills, particularly for children. And we are not policing or regulating it yet as well as we should.
Thank you. Our final question in this section of the meeting comes from Alan Chambers.
Thank you, Vice Chair. An inaccurate statement was unfortunately made by the Justice Minister on live radio yesterday regarding the data breach compensation funding. The Minister has subsequently admitted this morning that she misspoke yesterday. Can I ask the Chief Constable, when did he become aware that the Minister had misspoke, and how and by whom was this embarrassing information conveyed to him?
So I don't want to get into he said, she said. I was told yesterday that this information had been made public, and we all make mistakes. I'm hoping it's a premonition, Alan. I'm hoping it means that next week or before Christmas, we can play the same footage perhaps. And, this is such an important issue around the data breach for the officers and staff of the organisation. I don't think we should focus too much on someone who's made a mistake, a genuine mistake. What I am pleased about is that I get a sense that the executive, the finance minister, the justice minister, certainly this board collectively, are all in support of getting the data breach funding for the resolution that we're seeking at the moment through proceedings provided for. Because the sooner we deal with it, all the fiscal rules show it's the right thing to do, because otherwise it'll cost far more money. I'm delighted that there is a sense of real optimism that we're coming to a a good outcome, and I don't want to risk saying something that I shouldn't because nothing has been agreed. But I think people genuinely realise across different parts of the executive the importance of this issue. So I don't want to focus on what was obviously an innocent mistake made yesterday. I want to focus on the fact that we may be getting nearer to a conclusion to that funding challenge.
Okay, thanks, Chief Constable. We're going to move on to our next matter of business, which is the report from the Director General of the NCA. Director General, you've been very patient with us. Thank you for that. Hopefully you have found the discussion insightful in terms of the policing issues in relation to Northern Ireland. Your report outlines the NCA's work in supporting policing here and highlights some very notable operational successes. So I invite you to make some opening remarks and then we'll take questions.
Fine, and thank you. And conscious of time, I normally give a general threat update for serious and organised crime around the world. I'll maybe save that for questions if people have got questions on any of it. Just be a bit more concise. So, I mean, really good to be here. Conscious we've got a new member, so welcome, Deirdre. Just the thing I've said kind of many times before will be familiar to the rest of you is the National Crime Agency is a UK organisation. We are here to serve people of Northern Ireland as well as Scotland and England and Wales. My primary accountability is to the Home Secretary in London, but I absolutely do feel really accountable and responsible to you for Northern Ireland as well as to the Scottish Police Authority and ministers in Scotland. So delighted to be here. We take very seriously our responsibilities here. As you alluded to, Vice Chair, in introduction, I was here last week as well in Belfast for Chief Constable's Council. Very good that was here. We had a fantastic welcome, not just from PSNI, but from the city of Belfast. The Chief spoke at that about the policing in Northern Ireland and how that feels at the moment, but he also spoke at some length about the beauty of Northern Ireland. And so he did a lot for tourism in Northern Ireland as well, I think, with the police that were here. I alluded to a second ago that we also last week had a trilateral meeting between myself, the Chief, and Justin Kelly, the Commissioner from the Garda. So that's the second of those trilateral meetings we've had, and I think speaks to a really strong and improving relationship between the three organisations. It's been strong bilaterally in each of the directions for a while, but we are realising how much there is we can do together. So that was very productive. It was really good as well, Vice Chair, to welcome you and some of your team to the NCA headquarters in London back in November. So thank you very much for coming. I hope that was useful. Good to do that. Also alongside the Scottish Police Authority, lots of parallels I think that we can all see between the different areas. So just a few words on the report itself. So you will see in it that we record 141 disruptions in the last 6 months, and disruptions, I know for anyone tuning in and new members, is our way of kind of recording progress, and it is not just an activity that we've done, but an activity that we assess has had an impact in reducing serious and organised crime. So that can be an arrest or a seizure or a bit of safeguarding. It can be closing off a vulnerability, the whole range of things that can come into it. All of them called disruptions, and we grade them in terms of the scale of impact that they have had. So that is in there. The 141 figure is 25% higher than the kind of 3-year average that we have had, so it is up. I think the report is actually painting quite a strong picture of the impact, but I wouldn't necessarily lay it at the door of that 25% increase. So that 25% increase has largely come from lots more relatively minor cyber protect disruptions. So that's activities that we have done with companies or organisations in the UK and around the world that is going to reduce the cyber risk that they pose or the cyber vulnerability they have. And that is important because many of those are providing services in Northern Ireland as well as elsewhere. But it is added up to quite a large number there and a bigger proportion of the report than really it probably justifies. So I wouldn't take that as the reason why the report is good. I think what's good in the report, and you are beginning to see in there, is a few more really quite sophisticated investigations that are into really quite sophisticated organised crime groups in Northern Ireland. that we are doing alongside PSNI. So I thought I'd just pick out two of those. So it's on slide or page 13 in the report, but you will see we made 3 arrests in July into a drug smuggling group, and it's not actually explicit in the report, it should have been, but that is a Northern Ireland based drug smuggling organised crime group that is importing drugs from Europe into the UK, including into Northern Ireland. So they are big, they are sophisticated, we've been investigating them for some time. Really good to see those arrests taking place. And then another one to pull out, and there is some detail on slide 16 of the report, is into money laundering. So we have found a money laundering nexus in Newry, and given the location, unsurprising, it is money laundering that is going across the border, kind of up from Dublin and into Northern Ireland. And in that investigation, which has been going on for some time and is really quite sophisticated, we have so far made 9 arrests, and actually we've seized more cash since this report was sent to you. So we're now over 3 million in cash that has been seized from that investigation. And I think there's a lot more to come from that, in I'm sure cash to be seized, but also spin-off investigations that will come from it and further arrests that will be made. Not so much an individual investigation, but I should pull out as well the asset denial work that we do here as part of the paramilitary crime force, and our particular contribution to that alongside PSNI and HMRC. And there's some detail in the investigation, but just the headline point is we have £1.5 million of assets that we have either frozen or are investigating in Northern Ireland, largely associated with former paramilitaries, but certainly serious and organised crime, and a further more than 3 million associated with the same investigation, so assets that are connected to Northern Ireland, but actually held outside, largely in GB. So some of those are progressing well, and there's been progress on one of those just last week. We got a property freezing order on a property in Northern Ireland worth £300,000 for an individual who is currently in prison for drugs and money laundering offences, but absolutely associated with organised crime. Finally, just to pull out some of the challenges that are in the report and other nuances that you should clock, we are definitely seeing and continuing to see more people bringing in cannabis in their luggage as they come into airports. I've mentioned this to the committee before. It has dipped slightly actually in the last 6 months, but it is still high, and that is part of the figures that are in here. So a bigger part of the drugs disruption figures than we would expect. We're working hard to investigate this and try and stop it happening. At the moment, we are ending up seizing cannabis, arresting people, putting them through the court, and these are people that have been hoodwinked into going to Thailand, bringing back cannabis, getting a free holiday and being paid for it, and they are committing a crime and they really shouldn't, and some of them are ending up going to jail. The maximum sentence of 14 years, so they really shouldn't do it. But we don't want them to do it. We want to stop it happening in the first place. We've done quite a lot of comms to try and encourage people not to do this. There was also a meeting that the security minister in London had, along with my team, with some of the airlines involved as well, to see if we can tighten up security to make it harder to get cannabis in luggage onto planes in the first place. But that is certainly affecting our stats, and it's some of our resources are being pulled to that. And the other point that's worth pulling out of the report, because it has a big impact on PSNI as well, is the increased number of referrals that we are having to triage and then pass to police forces for child sexual abuse that we are seeing online. So it's the referrals that come in from the tech companies, go to the organisation in the US called NECMEC, and then out to countries around the world. For the UK, they come to us, to our Child Sexual Exploitation Referrals Bureau. We do a bunch of enhancement on that data, find out where it's located in the UK and send it out. We sent out 549 of those disseminations to PSNI in the last 6 months. So those figures are up on what we have been seeing before. They've been going up for the last few years. By the end of September, we'd already had more this year than we had in the entirety of 2024. We are now disseminating something like 800 disseminations out to police forces around the UK every week from that data. So that is a huge kind of burden on us, a huge resource strain on us in terms of processing that information. It is a really big challenge for PSNI, as Davey mentioned earlier on. It is a sign that more of this activity is happening, which is damaging, and we look back to the tech companies from it. But they are, of course, each one of them a terrible but important opportunity to intervene and protect a child. So really important that we act on them and address them as we all are. Two final points quickly. The figure of 141 disruptions that I've mentioned doesn't actually cover quite a lot of activity that is in the report, which is all the ancillary support that we provide to police forces around the UK in a whole series of different ways, and is listed in the end few slides. But we don't tend to chat about that at the board, so I thought I'd just quickly run through what some of those stats are, just for information. So we provide major crime investigative support, so we've got experts in a whole series of different matters, and we have provided 44 deployments into 29 major cases for PSNI in Northern Ireland in the last 6 months, a fairly typical figure. But those will be the biggest cases that PSNI are dealing with. They're in the lead, they're absolutely doing a brilliant job on them, but we are providing specific expertise and advice to support them. We provided 332 suspicious activity reports to PSNI to look at and see whether they want to seize or freeze the money. So reports that have come in from banks where there's a suspicion of money laundering. 39 suspicious activity reports where there's an indication of vulnerability, a child or an adult that may be vulnerable. We have supported PSNI in getting 44 fingerprints or DNA samples to support investigations from police forces around Europe. We've supported on 23 kidnaps or blackmail cases over the last 6 months with our anti-kidnap and extortion unit, and supported on 29 missing person cases. So that's just an example in 6 months of the type of support that we're providing to police forces around the UK, but particularly in Northern Ireland. I'm really conscious of time. One thing that is not in the report you might want to ask me in questions about is about our op Mechanise, which we've done UK-wide, but has been looking at crime that's taking place on the high street in shops. So I'll just trail that and you can ask about it if anyone is interested, but it's been a fantastic operation.
Very good.
Thank you,
Director General. Thank you for that introduction. Our first question is from Colin McGrath.
Yeah, thanks very much. I was just wondering, the ever experienced dogs in the street know that there is a serious issue in terms of drugs within both here in the north, across the island and across the UK. And there seems to be an increasing understanding that we may be being used as a backdoor entry into both the UK and Europe, given our location. But based on that and the concerns then that there are about the saturation of drugs within our own community as a result of more coming through here, your budget, we have 3% of the population here, but 1% of your budget that is directed towards activities here. Do you not think it might be appropriate to maybe put more resources here to try and help to deal with some of these crimes rather than leaving it for our already stretched PSNI to deal with?
Thank you. So I'll take questions in the order they've come. So drugs first. So absolutely, this is a massive challenge. So we are seeing the production. So heroin production actually has dipped, and heroin consumption in the UK has reduced. But pretty much every other metric on drugs is going up. Drugs deaths overall have gone up. We've got the 2024 statistics for England and Wales, but not Northern Ireland yet. But we have seen a significant increase again in the number of people that have died from drug misuse. Within that, we saw in England and Wales 1,100 people die from cocaine. So you normally associate drug deaths with heroin and opioids, but actually cocaine is proving a really significant killer at the moment. We've seen an increase in consumption from ketamine, particularly amongst young people, just incredibly cheap at the moment. And that is causing really big health problems, kind of destroys your bladder, basically. But actually also 60 people died last year from ketamine. So really significant. I mean, the production of cocaine has increased quite significantly, largely in Colombia, but other countries around there as well, and that is a large part of the problem. You asked about the kind of supply of it. So we're seeing it come into Europe through a widening series of methodologies, but absolutely one of them is through the Republic of Ireland, either kind of HGVs coming in on the ferries from Europe in container traffic, and also at-sea drop-offs, which I mean, the MV Matthews case was intended to be an at-sea drop-off before they it went wrong for them. But we're absolutely seeing that happening as well. So we are seeing, we think, more drugs coming in through the common travel area into GB. But I mean, but there's a whole series of different methodologies. That's just one. We're not seeing that being favoured as a methodology. It's just that supply is going up on every possible area. We are doing more than that. That was one of the areas that the chief and Justin Kelly, the commissioner from the Guards, and I were chatting about last week, was how we tackle that, both in drugs coming in containers and HGVs, and the at-sea drop-offs as well. So we've got kind of a plan and some progress on that. It's not just transiting Northern Ireland. There's obviously drugs consumed here. One of the kind of good bits of news on drugs, if we can say that, is that the deaths from synthetic opioids, and particularly nitazines, in Northern Ireland is still in very low compared to the rest of UK. It's 4 or 5, I can't remember the exact figure, in the last 2.5 years out of over 800 that we have had in the UK as a whole. So the proportion here is very small. But absolutely, drugs, and particularly cocaine, are being consumed here in Northern Ireland, and we have drug groups who are organising that. And I mentioned one of the cases earlier on that we have done to investigate that. In terms of our resources here, I'm not sure where the 1% figure comes from. We can't really provide a figure on the amount we spend on Northern Ireland, and we've gone through this with the board as well, because we absolutely have a team here, and it was great to visit John, to have John visit that last week. They spend a lot of their time working on cases in Northern Ireland, but actually we are a UK organisation. We base ourselves around the UK and do UK jobs, so they're absolutely also working on work that is elsewhere around the UK. But also, the Vice Chair and others were in Spring Gardens, our headquarters in London, and there's a whole bunch of people there who will at any given time be working on Northern Ireland cases. So I would be very surprised, and maybe I'll see if I can do some modelling of this, if it turns out that 1% of our activity is on Northern Ireland. I expect it is more than that. Certainly in lots of the work we do, we put more effort into Northern Ireland. The asset denial work that we do, that I briefly talked about, largely through the paramilitary crime force. I've mentioned here before that we set a much lower bar and threshold for taking on cases in Northern Ireland than we would elsewhere. So we are massively committed to what we do here.
Our next question is from Gerry Kelly.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation on the report, Graham. I just wondered if you could give a wee bit more about, because you're talking about closing down these criminal gangs or groups, and what the criteria is. I mean, notice in one of the charts there, you've gone from OCGs from 61 down to 44. I'm just trying to understand what happens after that. Is there a monitoring process in terms of the north here? Is it people just shift to other aspects of criminality? Is it just gone? Is it the leadership gone? Is that what it means? Maybe a wee bit more information about that.
Thank you, Gerry. Is the 61 to 44 figure in your report rather than mine, I think. But I mean, the question still stands. So I mean, these are really hard things to judge. It is rare to just dismantle an organised crime group in its entirety and then it just stops. I mean, partly our assessment is that the nature of organised crime has changed over the last 20 years. And 20 years ago, it did used to be quite a hierarchy, a kind of pretty fixed organisation. And by taking out some of the key people in that, you could dismantle it. Organised criminality now is much more networked. I mean, there are people who are significant and kingpins, and we absolutely do try and target them. But by and large, they work as a network, and there are a lot more people that provide crime as a service, that are providing services to a whole series of different criminal groups. So we absolutely focus on taking out the nodal points of that and the most important individuals, but it's quite hard to say that we've actually taken out a organised crime group and defined that, and it's not going to happen again. It's not going to re-emerge. Absolutely, we when we create a vacuum by taking out criminality, other people then try and fill it. We always see that. We work very hard to try and make sure that doesn't happen by having a plan that is trying to avoid that. But it's that is a perpetual challenge in organised crime is stopping that. David, did you want to? Yes, Gerry.
Maybe to make it simpler, I mean, obviously disruptions, the impact of disruptions is very easily understood because you're having an impact on wherever you go with. But just to go back to the question, is it that you follow the individuals? Because I'm just wondering when you say something is closed down or when it's so even if it's temporarily, I'm just wondering is then you follow because what you're saying is they can't shift the bed, so you follow the individuals. Is that the essence of sort of monitoring of it?
David, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I suppose if it helps, maybe I would classify it more as when you degrade to the point that they're no longer acting as a group, because the target is around organised crime gangs or groups. So when we degrade to the point that you will have individuals that are operating on their own, but again, this links into the prioritisation. So we will prioritise those groups that are causing most harm, degrade them to the point that normal policing, if you like, can carry on with those groups. That's not to say that they will not come back onto the radar, or indeed that we will not continue to monitor them. And I think for me, that's the whole system approach that we talk about in terms of the neighbourhood perspective, the Operation Connexus around the local neighbourhood knowledge and ensuring that we continue to monitor what those groups do after degradation so that they don't kind of regroup and rebuild. And that's that sort of revolving door that I think moving forward and with the right resourcing that we can put that final piece of the jigsaw back in, that effectively you clear the problem and then you kind of hold that position and build the community resilience to be able to respond to that moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Final question from Les Allamby.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Director General, for all the update. My question is about the PRUM Convention and access to fingerprint and DNA data across the European Union. I wonder if you can outline what the difficulties currently are and the particular implications for Northern Ireland and how those can be resolved.
Sure, thanks. So PRUM, just for general knowledge, the treaty that enables and allows for the exchange of biometric information between the member countries of it, largely the EU, but including the UK. So you're talking DNA, fingerprints, largely those are the main elements. Kind of really important for us. The two constraints on our ability to use that generally are whether everyone is signed up to it and the kind of processes are smooth and easy, and so that's one. And then the other is our capacity and capability to process all the information and get the requests going. So we are working on building up the second. I mean, it is pretty strong. We've had some absolutely brilliant results by doing proactive PRUM matching of kind of big data sets across Europe, and there is more to do there, but we've had some really good results on that. In terms of the kind of legal framework and ability to get information, that is slightly limited in terms of two countries within Europe, and one of them is Italy and the other is Ireland, actually, slightly surprisingly. And that is an issue we've raised with the Irish and are working with them on, and it's around their data protection legislation, and hopefully they will be able to amend that and allow for the easier flow of information. It's not that it won't be provided, it's just that when a match is there, we need to follow up with an international letter of request, and that just adds an extra layer of resource and time and delay to getting the information. John, did you or others want to follow up?
I was going to bring Bobby in. I mean, we actually raised this issue at the tripartite meeting that we had with the Irish last week. And we went through some of the detail. I mean, the framework is really good, but each country has slightly different legislation. And at the moment, in effect, we're not maximising things as we would like to. So there's a couple of gaps. It is complicated, I have to say. One of the things it might be useful for us to do, because there's been a lot of work done on this. In fact, the NCA have done a lot of work in trying to almost navigate ourselves and others through this, is if we give you a written response. Bobby did a very good presentation on it to myself, I'm putting him under pressure now, to myself, Justin and Graham, where he simplified it really well. But I'm worried now that he's looking a bit concerned. I'm worried. Bobby's more worried.
Yeah, I will try. I mean, I think there's really three risks for both jurisdictions. So at present, PSNI and NCA don't have access to the Irish fingerprint database. So that does impact on our investigations, resulting in potentially lost identification opportunities. Our Irish counterparts don't have access to the UK fingerprint databases, which again results in lost opportunities for them. And as Graham has mentioned, the current process around the DNA requires the submission of an ILOR, which is taken forward by the Public Prosecution Service. And that's just a notoriously slow process, which again builds delay in. So as the two senior leaders have said beside me here, there was agreement on Friday with An Garda Síochána that this is an area that collectively we want to put our weight towards to see if we can improve this. Everybody will benefit from this in terms of the agencies, but most importantly, the people on these islands.
Okay, thank you. Chief Constable, Director General, thanks to you and your teams for taking questions today. I know we've run over, but I think it's been a useful discussion. And thank you for your ongoing work on behalf of the community in Northern Ireland. This is the last meeting before Christmas, and it's also the last board meeting for John Wadham, the board's Human Rights Advisor. So on behalf of the board, I would wish to formally place on public record thanks and appreciation to him for his work and his wise counsel to the board over the course of 6.5 years. John, we wish you every success in the future. And he's actually left the room because he's quite a shy individual. Can I also take this opportunity to wish everyone a safe and peaceful Christmas and extend the board thanks to all those within policing, the NCA, and all the other emergency services for their work. Many of whom will be working over the festive period and in terms of keeping us all safe. We would also reiterate the messages that Mail gave in her presentation earlier, the safety messages in terms of how you're using the roads over the festive period. So please follow the guidance and advice that's out there. That concludes today's session. Our next scheduled board meeting is Thursday, the 5th of February, 2026.